Hi, grade fours. Welcome back to our online social lessons. I'm really excited about today. We are going to talk about the First Nations group, the Tsuut'ina. It's a hard one to say, kind of a mouthful, but they're the Tsuut'ina group, and we're going to talk about their teepees and the history behind their homes. So a teepee is essentially kind of like a tent. I would guess that a lot of tents that we have today came from the design of the First Nations teepee. And the people would actually bring these teepees all around and trade and change camps. They would live in them through every season. So I hope that you find it as interesting as I did. During Teachers Convention, I actually attended a session with two First Nations people, Bruce Starlight and Deanna Starlight, and they taught us all about the teepees. So I'm so excited to have some really good information to tell you. What else was I going to say? Oh, First Nation history, as we've learned, comes from stories and oral tradition. So basically people talking and it being passed from one person to the other. So I actually got to be a part of that and listen to Bruce's talk. And he explained all about the teepee. And I bet you're going to learn something you've never known before. So I'm just going to share my screen. I'm going to show you a quick picture of what I'm talking about, because some of you might not know what I'm talking about. And I just keep saying teepee, 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 and I have no idea what that is. So these are First Nations teepees. These ones are actually Blackfoot, but I'm showing you them because they're very similar between the different groups. So yeah, I'm going to show you this a little more in detail, especially that bottom picture, but we're going to talk first. So I'm just going to kind of explain, I'm going to use my oral storytelling to explain to you how they built the teepees. They had so much symbolism with the teepee. So I'm going to explain to you what different parts of the teepee meant to them, and even how the teepee was created and where they got the idea from. It's such a good story. So you have a sheet that looks like this in front of you. And I bet you're like, that's not notes, Miss Christal. What is that? Well, by the end, you're actually going to get to make your own teepee. We're going to fold it. We're going to use the poles just like the First Nations did. I'm very excited about that. But first, we're going to make a placemat so that when you're explaining the teepee to your brothers, your sisters, your parents, you can explain all the different parts. So as I explain, I want you to fill in what each of the parts means. And you're going to notice that each of these are body parts. I know that says bum, you can laugh. But each of these parts of the buffalo meant something to the teepee. So I'm going to explain that in more detail, but the buffalo are so important. So I hope you remember a lot from the buffalo lesson. In the end, you get to color your river and make your teepee, and you're going to get to draw what was inside of the teepee. So I'm excited. Let me get my notes, sit back and listen. Be ready for when I tell you to fill something in. So the first thing the First Nations needed to do when they were settling, when they had followed the buffalo to a new spot to live, they would find a river. River means life. Hint, hint, hint. River means life. So a scout, a person in the group, would go out ahead of the group that's traveling, and they would try to find a good spot to have their camp and then bring it back to the group. The group's not just going to say, hey, let's listen to that guy. He knows where to go and put up the teepee. No, they are going to talk to each other and decide together if that's what they're going to do. That's where they're going to go. The biggest goal of the First Nations peoples were to follow the buffalo and whatever they were hunting. So as soon as the land was all worn out, there's no more food for the buffalo herd would move, and the First Nations people would follow them. Long ago, the groups used to move from camp to camp. So they're not staying, they don't build a house with a basement and a garage. They don't build that. They have a camp that can move. They followed different seasons, and they followed the buffalo. They always would go back to the same place they left at some point, because they would actually bury food underground. So maybe there's one spot you like that the group wants to stay every winter. They'd bury food, come back sometime later and dig it up. They would always leave a circle on their camp so they would know where their teepee was because that was a good place. So they'd come back and say, there's our teepee circle. We are going to stay here again. If you can see any archaeological sites, if you ever go to Head Smashed in Buffalo Jump or Buffalo Rubbing Stone, you might actually see some teepee circles still in the ground. Ooh. When they got to their camp, they would make an offering. That's like a religious thing. They would make an offering because you don't know if anyone stayed there while they were gone, and they didn't know who else passed over it. So they would take tobacco and burn it and ask to borrow the land because there was something there before them. They'd ask permission to use the land and put everything, once they were done, put everything back the way they had found it, barring leaving their circles. So that was a lot of information, but that's how they found their camp, and that's how they decided where to stay, and they always paid respect to the land. So let's talk about the teepee poles. The Tsuut'ina peoples would use lodgepole pine for their teepee poles, but they would also use spruce trees because that's lighter. Now, when they're moving camp to camp, you have to remember they have to bring everything with them. So these teepee poles are coming with them. They take off the bark so that they could bring it with them, because if you ever have felt a tree after it rains, it feels slimy because of the bark. So if you shed that bark off, then if it rains, the rain will just nicely trickle off the soft wood. Whew. Yeah, so the teepee had to be able to be taken down within 20 minutes. So it couldn't be super fancy, it couldn't be heavy, it just had to be strong. The first thing they would do is roll out the canvas. So you know how there's fabric all around the outsides? They would roll that out, and they would take one big pole called the spine pole, and they would attach the canvas to that pole. So it's the most important pole. So you have spine right here. You could write main pole, MAINPOLE. That's the main pole. So they would tie it to the top. So pretend this is the top of the pole. They would tie it right around here and leave a bunch of room. As you would have seen in those pictures from before, they just make sure they have to tie it really tight so it doesn't slide around, and they want to make sure there's some room. The next thing they did was choose 4 more poles for the legs. And remember, so see how I'm starting to use like body part words? Well, that is how they thought of this. They believed that the next 4 poles were the buffalo's legs. So you could write 4 poles, just write the number 4 and then POLES, 4 poles. So they would use the poles and they would measure from the spine, and they'd have to go out like this. Like imagine a buffalo's 4 legs. That's how they're thinking of it. And then you have 2 more poles, and they are door poles. They would sit even further outside. Let me just see. There's a really good picture I found. Give me one quick second. It's not as quick as I had hoped. Oh, it's lost. Okay, I'm just going to share with you what I'm looking at so you're not just staring at me looking at stuff. So right here, they would have the 2 front poles, and that would support the door of the teepee. So like, do you see how there's poles right here? So there's 4 poles back here being very supportive. There's a main spine pole, and then there's the 2 front poles up there. Back to my notes. Okay. You have to tie the canvas to all of the poles, and you want to make sure it's super tight so it doesn't slip. Imagine sleeping in the middle of the night and it's cold, and then the canvas of your house falls off. That would be really cold. So after they have the legs and they have the spine, then they have what's called the ribs, and there's 3 more poles on each side of the teepee to give it even more stability, and those are called the ribs. So you could write 3 poles right there. So now I've got the legs, the spine, and the ribs. And we're going to keep going. So after he explained all the poles, Bruce Starlight then kind of started talking about how important the home was to the First Nations people. It was their first home, and the person who took care of the home was the woman, and what was a woman. She looks after the house. She keeps it tidy. She raises the children, and she was also in charge of keeping the fire hot. Now, women are the ones that have babies with humans. So the First Nations take that as women create life. And to them, fire was life. It was one of the most important things on their camp. So the woman was in charge of the fire because she was in charge of the little people. She was in charge of life, the fire. The next part of the buffalo that we're going to talk about the next part of the teepee that we're going to talk about is the very tip top where all the poles come together and meet. And that is called the collarbone. So your collarbone is right here, and your head kind of sticks up. So the collarbone is an important part of your body. If you ever break it, it's going to hurt. But the collarbone is where the poles meet. Where is on the word wall, please spell it right, and then the poles meet. The next part of the teepee is the door poles. So I did talk about them before. They're the ones that stick out to support the door, and those are the shoulders of the buffalo. So the shoulders are door poles. So write door poles in that little box. We're getting close. We're almost done. So imagine a buffalo, and imagine the buffalo is sitting down. I'm just going to see if I can find a picture, because it might be hard for you to picture in your mind. I cannot find a picture. So you're just going to have to imagine a buffalo sitting like a dog. That is how the First Nations people view their teepee, as a buffalo sitting. That's why I'm naming off all of these different parts of the buffalo and comparing them to the parts of the teepee, because that's why they have all of these things. They are mimicking the buffalo. So then we look at, so we got the door poles, the shoulders. The door poles and the door stop the wind. They have to be very strong. Then the next part of the teepee is the canvas. So the fabric that goes all around the outside, and that is the buffalo's skin. So you can write teepee canvas. Teepee is spelled up here. Canvas is C-A-N-V-A-S. Canvas. And the canvas was made out of buffalo skin. The back pole of the teepee, the very back, has to be strong as well. And it is called the buffalo's bum. That is the person who is telling me all this information, his words, not mine, but the buffalo, you're just going to put back pole. B-A-C-K-P-O-L-E, back pole. The front part of the teepee, where the hole is to get in the door, that kind of represents to them when you cut open the buffalo to get what you need out of it. So those are all the parts of the buffalo, except one. We're getting to it. So now imagine this big teepee. It's huge. And sometimes more than one family actually lived inside, which is crazy, but amazing. So at the very top, I'm just going to pull up that picture for you so that you can see again. Keep losing Zoom. There it is. Okay. So I'm thinking about up here. So you have to tie the teepee super tight at the top, or else it's all just going to fall down. And the more poles you use along the outside, the more spread out the canvas is going to be. So it's going to be neater. And then at the top, there's these two things. They're called flags. Do you see them right here? And they could be controlled by two other little poles from inside. And you would use those to control the smoke in the teepee. So imagine they have a fire in there, like a real fire, keeping the house warm. So they would use these flaps, these little flags, to control which way the smoke's going to go out. So if the wind is coming from this way, you want the smoke to go out this way. And then if it was opposite, you would close this flap a little bit and open this flap more. So those flaps are actually called the ears of the buffalo. So for ears, you're just going to write smoke flaps. So SMOKE and then FLAPS, smoke flaps. So they would also sometimes put bells on the teepee in that area, on those, those flaps, so that if spirits came, the bells would ring, or they would also know when the wind or a storm is coming. The teepee usually faced east because of the winds that were there. And sometimes they would face the south because the south brings warm wind. Any Chinook that we have usually comes from either the mountains or in the south. Okay. Oh, you know what? I forgot one part. I'm just going to even add it to the sheet as I speak to you right now. Okay, the last part are the buffalo's horns, and that is those big sticks at the very top that are pointing out. Those are the buffalo's horns. So those are all the different parts. You should have all of these boxes filled in right now. And then you should also have what the river meant. Next, I'm going to tell you about how the First Nations came to understand the buffalo and think of the buffalo as their teepee and as their home. So this Bruce Starlight told us this story, and it goes that there was a man and a son hunting, and together they killed a buffalo and butchered it. While they were butchering the buffalo, a blizzard came and they were freezing. The man told his son that he wasn't going to make it because he was too small. So he put the little boy, this is kind of yucky, but this was very good survival. He put the boy inside the buffalo that they had cut up, and then he went for help. And it ended up keeping the little boy warm and alive. That night, the buffalo came to the boy in a dream and told him that towards the spring, the buffalo was going to visit him again and give him a gift. So the boy wakes up and, it's a dream. So he kind of just goes about his life. He didn't die in the cold and he's happy. He just goes on with his life. Where am I? So when the spring finally came, after the winter, the buffalo came back and gave the boy a dream about the teepee. He told him that the teepee and the pole that the canvas is tied to is the spine. The poles that go down the side are the ribs. So there were 3, remember? The 4 main poles are the legs. The flaps up here are the ears. The poles holding the flaps are the horns, and the buffalo is sitting. The back of the teepee is the bum. I had to say it again. So those are all of the things that make the teepee. Is that not so interesting that they relate the teepee to the buffalo so much? And it makes sense. In the winter, they would use thicker buffalo hide for the canvas to keep the wind out. And then I'm just gonna once again show you the picture. Need my notes and the picture. There we go. So they would use a really thick hide when it was winter, and then a thinner hide in the summer, because again, there's a fire in there. You don't want it to get too hot. If it's cold outside, they would they would pile up snow around the outsides of the teepee so that air wouldn't or wind wouldn't go under it. And I think that's so smart. Okay, where are we? Okay. Now we're going to talk about the inside of the teepee. It's really cool. Look at the canvas. Sorry, I got lost in a picture. Give me 1 second to find, I think it's at the bottom. here's some pictures of the inside. So this is what we're going to learn about next. And this is actually what you're going to draw. I just need to figure out a way to get my notes so I can see them. So again, I want to be respectful and I want to make sure that I say everything right. Okay, so once you have your teepee up and you have the center pole with a rope that goes down, so there would be a center pole right here. Again, the spine and a rope that would go down. And then you want to keep tightening it so that you can keep the canvas really tight. Once you're inside, they dig a hole for the fire and then they would sometimes put ashes over it, and you could cover it with hide. So they've got the fire right here. Let's see, do I have a picture? No, but the fire is right here. Pretend they would cover it in ashes. You know how when you're camping and then the ashes are really hot so you can roast marshmallows on them? It's the best kind of s'mores. But anyway, they would cover those ashes with a thick hide, and then they would sleep on it, and it would make it so warm. The owner of the teepee would sleep at the back. That's where they would get to sleep. And they would have like little partitions. I'm trying to zoom, there we go. Little partitions between each family. And it was considered very disrespectful. You don't get to go where the owner is. Where am I? So in the inside, they also had curtains around. Take a look there. So this would help to keep the cold air out and the warm air in. They would burn sage so that bugs wouldn't come in. Rain, do you see how this canvas covers these poles? If it rained, because look at this is open. So if it rained, the rain would catch on the poles and actually follow the pole outside, and these curtains, the canvas on the inside, would block it out. So the poles would take the water back outside the teepee. So smart. All right, now we're gonna get to how they decorated their teepees. Where are we? Let's see. So a teepee is painted because of dreams. It's a dream or it's passed on to you. And you get that design based on who you are, or you can get it from your elder. So some paintings are things that you have to remember or respect. Some paintings were stories. In camp, they really did not like you to raise your voice. So you have to have a camp voice. You have to be quiet. Where are we? Yeah, so sometimes they would have 4 families in one teepee. Sometimes they'd have curtains between, or things like this made out of beads or different fabric. Yeah. And then all the designs on these dividers actually would represent one family. Isn't that cool? So if your family slept right here, your divider could have mountains, it could have bluebirds, it could have a river, whatever is significant to your family could be on your divider. They would have sticks in their teepees that they would use to turn over the stones or the wood in the fire. They would have a tripod, that's what this is called, to help keep food, like they can hang hide over it, or different materials that they need to keep warm. They could hang a pot if they're cooking over it. Yeah, so that is all I learned. Once they are done with their teepee, they fold everything up, keep what's important, and then they make sure that the land looks the way it did before they got there, except the circle, of course. And that's the teepee. So I hope you learned a lot. It is so interesting, and I hope you learned stuff that you can go tell your parents about. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to make your own teepee. So the first thing you're going to make, well, color your river. You can color the land around. You could make it grassland. You could make it like a field of gold grass. You could make it rocky, your choice. Then you're going to actually design the inside of your teepee. So make sure you get that fire in the middle and draw a nice tripod around it. I'll show you my example. I'm doing it very fast. Okay, so I've got my fire in the middle, and then I have to make sure I have my tripod around it. And then I could draw. Obviously, yours will be colored and very nice. Okay, so I could draw my tripod, and I could draw some meat hanging on there to dry. And then you could draw the different people's little areas. So you have to draw the owner of the teepees, draw the blankets they sleep on. You could draw the dividers. You could draw more blankets over here. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be fancy. It really doesn't, but try to do your best work. I'm going to share my screen with you again. And now you are looking here. You could draw the sticks that they use to turn the fire. Here are the dividers. They have some decorations. Wish I could read that. The shield. A little kid on the ground in this one. Dogs were not allowed to roam free in the teepees because it was considered dogs were very powerful. So it had to be respectful. Let the dogs, don't let the dogs in. So I'm going to show you some more pictures of inside. See the fabric that keeps the rain out. So that would be the owner's area back there. They've got some buckets. You could draw pots. You could draw bows and arrows that they would use to hunt with. So, and then once your inside of your teepee is done, you're going to get the outside, and you can decorate it how you'd like. There's tons. I'm going to go really slow through this. Pause the video when you see a design you like, or you can combine a couple designs if you want to. Okay. That one's just a white one. There's some nice designs. They can paint. They painted some of their teepees. These ones are cool with the circles. Circles were very symbolic. You could do an animal design around. There's some cool lines. There's a bunch of designs in a row. Remember, pause when you are ready, when you find some ideas that you like. I believe this teepee is in the Glenbow Museum if you've ever been there. That looks really pretty. Polka dot, that's cool. Okay, so I hope you've seen something you like. Okay, once you're done that, you're gonna cut out your teepee. Oh, don't cut the way I just showed you. Cut around the dotted line. Whew. And then you're gonna turn it over so that you can kind of see the lines through. And we are going to, I think we're gonna have to figure out together how to put the poles in. They're not gonna be real poles. I don't have giant sticks, but we could use, we're gonna use toothpicks to come out the top so that it looks like there's actual poles in there, and we're gonna tape them in. I think we're gonna have to do that together because I am not imaginative right now. And then your little teepee is gonna sit on your teepee spot, and then you can pick it up and show everybody what's inside. So I know this video was long, but I hope you learned a lot, and I hope you can tell other people what you've learned, and I really hope you enjoy making your teepee. So see you next time.